Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to offer an overview for Pluto Mars opposition through the 12 house polarities. So I need to say a few things before I jump in. Obviously, there's no one size fits all. So with what I'm going to express, I really encourage everyone to internalize this according to your own personal soul experience and take what's helpful. My intention is to offer a framework for understanding the basic archetypal dynamics that are represented in each house polarity. So I'm going to be speaking to three basic points. Now you can check out my most recent video where I shared some guidelines and tips for interpreting this opposition in your natal chart. That would be helpful for understanding where I'm coming from here. So I'm focusing on three pieces. One, what is the trigger? And that's going to focus specifically on just understanding Mars. Mars in Cancer as a part of this dynamic. What kind of dynamics is being instigated very viscerally and tangibly in your life relative to Mars? Two, how is this trigger instigating the resistance patterns of Pluto, right? This Mars signature in opposition to the deeper psychological content of Pluto. What's being instigated here through that activity? And then three, what is the evolutionary intention? And we read that as, what is the deeper teaching and healing and the growth opportunity of this Pluto transit relative to its polarity with Mars? And it's working with that entire axis where we're being stretched and pushed to grow and step more into our resiliency, our agency, our soul strength beyond what we might know that we can. And so this opposition is a deep evolutionary push for growth, to evolve more into our potential and to appreciate, and this is something that I've been repeating many times, our growth edge with Mars Pluto is always going to take us where we haven't even known we could go because it's pushing up against where we don't know our strength. So whether the victimization, the fear, the insecurity, the holding on, the attachment, the disempowerment, all of that is pointing to where there's another way. There's another way of seeing, there's another way of responding relative to knowing ourselves in a more empowered and aligned way. And this is a function of desire. This evolutionary process for all of us is a matter of our sincere desire to evolve and experience our life and our experiences in a way that is other than the struggle that we might be familiar with. So I'm going to be reading from my notes here. This is a newsletter that I'm actually going to be sending out the day that I post this video. I will often write articles in tandem to these videos, and this is a way of me, for myself, sort of digesting and chewing on these teachings. I might spend a couple of days just working on the article, and it just how I really connect with the heart of that which I'm bringing forward. So I learn a lot from this. I will often send these articles out maybe 2 or 3 times a month. So if you want to receive this newsletter and all future articles, you can subscribe in the description below. You can also access all of my archives of recent articles on my newsletter page. So before I jump in, a couple announcements. My Planets That Square the Nodes class series is coming up very soon. This is a series, a 12 class series on learning and applying the meaning of individual planets in their square to the nodal axis of the moon. I recently taught a free intro class, which is a requisite for this series. You can check that out below. In this class, I taught what is the meaning of this square, what is the interpretive technique and the wisdom teaching of this particular configuration. We learned how to identify it, how to work with it, how to identify the specific karmic dynamics, how to find the resolution and the healing and the teachings that want to come through this square. It was a very rich class. I highly recommend it. Throughout this class series, we're going to be applying these teachings with each planet with a diversity of nodal rulership situations, a diversity of unique configurations. So check it out in the description below. It's something I'm deeply excited to teach and to continue to deepen in my own learning, available for all levels of astrological knowledge. As always, I'm available for one-on-one sessions for individuals, couples, and discounted long-term soul-to-soul companionship sessions for those that want to work with me more long-term. Okay. So let's jump into this analysis. As always, I'm going to timestamp these signatures. Okay, Mars in the 1st in Cancer, Pluto in Capricorn in the 7th. So how is Mars instigating experience now? This emphasizes the fight-flight response of Mars, 1st house. The triggers can be of any perception where we are seeing ourselves as being attacked or held back or limited in some essential way. And there can be very strong and visceral emotion and emotional reactivity emerging here. Something to really pay attention to with Mars in the first is the temptation to be very reactive and responsive and to give into those immediate senses of there's something threatening me. Okay. 2, the strong emotional energy of this house placement will bring us face to face with where we might perceive ourselves to be stuck or defined by the status quo of our relationships. How Mars is triggering the deeper psychological content of Pluto, Capricorn, 7th house. The disempowerment that we might feel of other people's judgments, the roles, the expectations and obligations that we may feel defined by. I cannot do anything to change my reality. I am stuck by what other people need me to be. And thus the only thing that I know how to do is either fight, defend, or attack, or fawn. So the visceral security dynamics of Mars and Cancer in the first, relative to the entrapment and the being overly defined by who we're supposed to be, of Capricorn in the 7th, might lead to a sense of, I can't be free, I can't act. Either I need to fight to get my freedom, or fawn because I don't know how to maintain my own individuality. So the evolutionary intent here is to eliminate attachment to external forms of approval and validation. Without concern with what people think, expect, or project upon you, you can listen and stand your ground without defense and without giving your power away. When you know yourself to be fundamentally free, you can trust your capacity to respond with maturity and clarity of mind. Relationship and agreements may need to be explored and worked out so they are in harmony with each individual soul. And this requires maturity and calmness of mind. There's really nothing to be afraid of here. And again, to fulfill that evolutionary intention and growth of this, we need to recognize the status quo of what we know and what's secure and what's familiar might result in this deep sense of feeling suppressed or blocked or limited. We need to be able to meet how we feel and what's arising for us and not go into fear, flight, or reaction. To actually bring it forward and say, hey, this is about growth. This is about evolution. Let's look at what's here. And we are responsible for our feelings. We are responsible for our reactions. 2, Mars in the 2nd house, Pluto in the 8th. This emphasizes a core concern around our basic survival needs. So the analogy here is like a wild animal hunting in the forest to provide for its family. There can be a fear relative to one's resources and the possibility of living in a frenetic anxiety of not having what one needs. In most cases, the absence of resources isn't actually the cause of stress. It's the anxiety and the dysregulation that one creates as a result of their own fear that is the cause of anxiety and stress. Not having what we need often is not the issue. It's the fear, the anticipation, the fight or flight that comes up in the anticipation of not having our basic needs met that causes our stress and pain. This ends up burning up our own inner resources and creating more deprivation. Because we look at a very primal, I'm hunting out to make sure I'm providing for my family, and I gotta, the wolf has to kill the animal to bring it back to the pack. There's a very hyper, on guard sense of attunement, right? And it's not always about the visceral, I'm hungry and I'm starving. It's often about this deep, more primal need to make sure that we're protecting and preserving our basic life. So that's the trigger, that's the anxiety, that can be the stress that's arising with Mars on a very visceral level. And we can see that might be applying in terms of, how are we earning money? How are we getting our needs met? How are we providing for a basic foundation of care and wellness in our life and of those that we care for? How is Mars triggering the deeper evolutionary content of Pluto? Okay, in a deep concern for one's basic needs and security, relationship, sharing, intimacy, and closeness to others, being able to share, meet, and be vulnerable, can feel like the last thing that we might want to do. I have nothing to share and I don't want to lose anything more. Or conversely, I don't have what I need, but maybe if I get close to this person, I'll get something from them. I mean, the issue here is energy can either get entangled in unhealthy ways that end up degrading and diminishing our true value, Or we can find ourselves protective, jaded, and unavailable to truly trust others, right? Where it becomes more a matter of like, what are you going to take from me, or what am I going to get from you? But not a real availability to show up in relationship. 8th house Capricorn. We get involved in all kinds of experience. We invest our time, our energy, our resources in something that produces more growth beyond something we can create by ourselves. But that Mars in Cancer can be very frightened that there's something scary out there. And so I can't really open up and share and really let go. So then what's the evolutionary intention here? It is to get unstuck. So the more you fear and hold on to, the more scary life and intimacy does become. Conserve and protect your resources, but also let it go. Share your inner wealth, join with others, and let life reveal a greater possibility of abundance that you would otherwise not find in your own isolation. Conversely, if there are unhealthy patterns of abuse and manipulation, and this can really be an issue of kind of getting stuck in a pattern of this is how I live, this is what I'm entangled in. A lot of addictive patterns can be manifesting in this polarity. This is to push you and build trust in your own strength and eliminate whatever is keeping you stuck. The learning is that we are resourceful enough and strong enough to protect the agency and freedom of our soul. This requires looking head on without fear at all the things that might tempt to scare us. Do not give in to the patterns of use and being used. Your soul value is far greater than that, and life is not here to degrade you. And the teaching, really what demonstrates our fundamental security, is being able to look head on at that which we're actually afraid of. Without looking head on, we're going to project that something up there is causing my insecurity, something is threatening my essential safety. And we can really, this signature almost encapsulates, if you think of it as a sort of like national level, the archetype of getting all your cans of food and bottles of water and closing your doors and getting your guns and making sure no one steals your food during the impending apocalypse. We can live in this hyper state of I'm making sure that I'm protecting my security, all the while not aware of how unprotected we are in our defensiveness. We create so much poverty for ourselves when we are in a state of fear, even if it's under the guise of, I got to make sure I got what I need, in the case of losing all the things that I value and what I have. Okay, Mars in the 3rd, Pluto in the 9th. So when we are afraid, we can revert to very poor listening skills and immature communication. The ability to listen and hear what is being said may be diminished by a strong and visceral reaction to every word or thought that elicits within you some kind of emotion that you have not yet worked through. I say something about buying canned foods and immediately there's something that arises for you and you don't hear the rest of what I say, or you can't hear it because you need to say something that's really important for you. We can become protective and defensive when we encounter information, words, data that elicits something insecure and unresolved within us. This can become the means for becoming argumentative for no good reason other than you don't like the way something that someone said made you feel. This is really about the untamed mind. Mars in Cancer in the 3rd is going to go all kinds of places and not be present because everything that's heard and taken in is going to elicit some kind of emotional response. So we might feel very protective and thus unavailable to truly have any kind of meaningful interaction. Thus, too, this Mars is going to trigger the deeper psychological content of Pluto, where with the reactivity of the monkey mind feverishly attempting to gain a sense of security, there will be no true learning, and I would say really no true meaning or value in any kind of interaction. It's like walking through life constantly internalizing everything that's happening through the lens of, what is this reminding me of? What thought or what counter thought is this bringing up? And we might actually be on this immense defense, not really able to participate in life at all because everything is triggering us. Life will offer no congruency or meaning. With no greater insight into the meaning and purpose of life, there's no compass for navigation. This can feel very disempowering, not knowing yourself is capable of knowing. The resistance pattern here can be to express as misreading the signals, jumping from one conclusion to the other, being very far from any kind of intuitive vision. So the fear, the resistance patterns of Capricorn in the ninth house is we're not in touch with our own intuitive compass in life. The fundamental disempowerment is I don't know the truth, I can't understand, I can't grasp any deeper meaning in life. We might feel lost or not connected to our own internal spiritual authority to intuitively translate our experiences and make clear decisions. When our emotional reactivity is so strong and we're coming from fear perceptions, we won't be able to do that. Thus, the evolutionary intention here is to strengthen your direct intuitive knowing. Taking in the impressions and data points from all around, then we quiet the mind and choose the response of non-reactivity. There's a quality of repose in learning how to receive the input of the environment, but to consider our response and not become victim to our reactivity. Resisting the temptation to interpret and draw premature conclusions, you remain free of dogma, free of beliefs and ideas that are not actually known. You keep your attention on direct perception, not reactivity. As a result, you begin to develop wisdom and start to understand the patterns and purpose behind all that otherwise seemed random and disjointed. Mars in Cancer in the 4th, Pluto in Capricorn in the 10th. So this is naturally emphasizing the natural archetypes of Cancer and Capricorn in their natural houses. This transit can emphasize a very visceral and immediate sense of feeling unsafe. That our core structures of support and dependability are erratic, unreliable, and entirely dysregulated. When we are stuck on a sense of our own unsafety, it's very easy to act out in defensive and angry and reactive ways. This is appropriate for a child when they feel hungry, tired, or lonely. But as adults, that simply might be the unhealed child in us screaming for love and attention. So Mars instigating this activity, Cancer in the 4th, I feel unsafe and I don't know what to do about it. This triggers the deeper content of Pluto in Capricorn in the 10th, with the angry, hurt, afraid child acting out. The one thing we might feel most resistant to is to actually take responsibility for our personal reality. To accept that we are responsible for our behavior and the effects of that behavior. Again, it's okay for a child to act a certain way and to even depend upon the environment to hold it down for them. The child needs the mature adult to be there for them. We, however, need to hold it down for our own selves. We are responsible for our actions and our choices, and thus this transit can trigger a strong sense of either feeling weighed down by the stress of being an adult relative to the intensity of the strong feelings we are having, or just an overall fear and refusal to tend to our own personal reality. It's that dichotomy between the inner child and the adult. And we might feel like, I can't be the adult. There's too much stress. I can't take responsibility where I feel like there's too much going on, eliciting this deep underlying sense of insecurity. So then the evolutionary intention is to own up to our own personal choices, reactions, and behaviors, and to make positive choices. We meet the stress of evolution by way of acknowledging that we cannot allow our personal emotional reality to be swayed by the comings and goings of people and events, but rather must be determined by way of our own personal commitment to be the kind of person we choose to be. This is a matter of soulful self-discipline to concentrate, which is a great Pluto keyword, on the kind of work we are here to do, and to do whatever it takes, and to establish the kinds of boundaries that we need to establish in our life. Without those Pluto and Capricorn boundaries, which is fundamentally a commitment to the kind of person we want to be, the Mars in Cancer is going to trigger all of where we're not aligned. It's going to instigate and kind of bring up all of our internal weakness and tempt us to act out of alignment, out of our own agency. This is not a cause for judgment, fear, or repression. It is a cause for wisdom, to meet the challenge of the moment as an opportunity to nurture long-term growth. What kinds of choices are needed right now? How can we embrace the conditions of our life in a way that nurtures more health and congruency in our lives and in the lives of those that we care for? Again, the core of this is we are responsible for our emotions. We are responsible for our reactions. We are responsible for what we're feeling. The stress and the growth of Pluto in Capricorn is asking us to take responsibility for and rely on the question, who do I want to be? And this doesn't mean repressing anything. This is a great teaching for this polarity in general. It doesn't mean repressing anything. It really means, how do I integrate all that's arising and work with it and establish a greater structural reality in my life to integrate all that is needed and to move myself forward in a better way. So often, the problems that arise in our life are just pointing to the need to change the conditions and the parameters of our life. If we change the conditions, we change the structure, we change the ways in which we've organized ourselves, often these problems cease to exist. For example, if every morning you are late to work because you're dealing with the kids and all the needs of the family, that's an external expression of something that you seem to have no power over, resulting in never getting somewhere on time. The problem isn't that you're always late. The problem is you're not positioning yourself in agency relative to your life. There's a quality of saying, I'm going to create structure, I'm going to create order, I'm going to meet all of this, where the emotional needs can actually be met with greater containment, greater structure, greater ground. It might mean waking up an hour earlier to have your personal time, get yourself aligned, clean the kitchen, get the breakfast ready. There's a commitment to not be disempowered by the conditions of our life here. All right, Mars in Cancer in the 5th, Pluto in the 11th. So the trigger of Mars here is the inner child, the one that needs to be seen, that needs to feel important, to know that it all matters, that it matters, might be calling for immense attention at this time. This signature can emphasize the vulnerability of being out there in the world, unsure of how secure one is to shine and to be oneself. The essential fear here is not being cared for and not being important. And thus, reactivity and reaction can express as a sort of immature, dramatic call for attention on the one hand, or a fearful retreat from expressing oneself on the other. Every emotion can be blown out of proportion relative to the insecurity of not being loved, not being valued, not being seen, not being important. Life might be taken way too personally, internalizing all experience as somehow reflective of oneself. So that Mars in Cancer can be highly dramatic. And my daughter's practicing for a play that's going to happen next week. And it's so fun, going with her and watching her practice and being with the other kids in that age group. It's like, I can tell what's most important for them isn't that they learn their lines in the dance. What's most important is that they're being seen. They're out there. They're learning that they are loved, they are seen, that they are important. And it's just this beautiful experience. However, there's ground, there's structure. And this is where point 2, this Mars in Cancer is triggering Capricorn in the 11th. You're not the only one on stage. You have to follow the rules. You're a part of a community here. You can't just go off and do whatever you want. So this trigger pushes right up against the resistance to learning to be true to ourselves, to just be what we are, both with no concern what it looks like, no concern with whether we fit in, but also recognizing that we can't just be overly concerned and fixated on, am I important, am I seen? We have to learn how to be true to ourselves and just hold that in community, right? Not be overly subjective and outwardly focused. The emotional instigation of this Mars transit can elicit a sort of overly fragile paranoia, either wherein nearly everything is seen as a source of judgment and hate coming from the outside, or we're not taking responsibility to accept the effects that we have on others. It can seem very real that indeed no one likes me, or that everyone is out to get me, or that they don't want me here, or that, I'm just going to do my own thing and it doesn't matter what other people think. So the evolutionary intention is to be what we are and detach from concern, both with what other people may or may not think about us, and the hyper-focus of our own subjective personal reality. We need to be determined to be who we are and live according to our inner soul purpose, regardless of what it looks like on the outside, whether we're understood, whether we fit in, whether people accept us or not. Most of the time, people aren't judging us. They're really just reflecting back to us our own internal uncertainty about ourselves. This is about generating our own soul permission to be what we are, true to our own vibration. In this way, we can bring benefit to society and our community in a positive way, because we are courageous enough to self-actualize and share our unique gifts, even if it risks being seen or unappreciated. With you being you, new things can happen in this world and we all benefit from it. And I think there's an immense amount of value and growth and strength in recognizing the more involved in the world we become, the more we risk the possibility of being vulnerable. The more we risk the possibility of our works not being seen or appreciated or being rejected or being told you don't really matter, right? This becomes a stretch and a push to remain and to abide in our soul resiliency. Still be who you are. Be the parent to your own soul vibration. And don't degrade that vibration just for the sake of belonging or because you're afraid of what it might look like. Mars in Cancer in the 6th house, Pluto in Capricorn in the 12th. So the trigger here is this emphasizes the need to respond to the needs of our physical reality with thoughtfulness and care. Whatever work is in front of us, be it tending our health, caring for our family, or our healing profession, being hasty and overwhelmed with the details will only make things worse. Here we are triggered to respond, not react, to what needs our attention and care. So Mars in Cancer in the 6th house is going to be stimulating all the things in our life that are requiring our simple, consistent daily attention. And we might feel overwhelmed by that. We can easily procrastinate it. We can easily get overwhelmed in a sense of perfectionism because there's so much to seemingly deal with. So this triggers relative to Pluto and Capricorn in the 12th house. This transit can reflect a heightened degree of stress. So many details, so many things going wrong or requiring persistent, ongoing attention. Perhaps it seems like there is no space for rest, that this world is just one problem to solve and manage after another. This triggers a resistance pattern to Pluto and Capricorn in the 12th in that we can feel burdened and even victimized by forces greater than our control. The challenge in this signature is to notice if we are either becoming resentful of the crisis that we can't seem to get out of, or if we are becoming masochistic and self-degrading in our inability to tend to what needs tending. So we're learning here to surrender to what we cannot control and tend to the details. The issue with Pluto and Capricorn in the 12th is this greater existential trust and surrender to meaning and purpose in life beyond and greater than our own making. That might feel very hard to do when that Mars in Cancer in the 6th is right there in your face saying, children have a fever, you got 20 emails to catch up on, you haven't gotten enough sleep, all these details in your life are calling your attention. We can really struggle with that dynamic of how do I let go of control? How do I let go of stress and trust life when there's so much pressure and stress in my life? Right? So we can either become sort of resentful or overly masochistic, overly controlling, overly stressed out in attending to all the details. So the evolutionary intention here is to become anchored in a higher meaningful purpose for life beyond our own making. The very tangible and concrete daily things to do are not meant to take us away from God, but they are rather the way in which we are to demonstrate our patience, faith, and devotion to become a more pure servant of love. The learning here is to understand what to control and what not to control, which is a great 6th house, 12th house lesson in general to contemplate. Where there is stress, overwhelm, and crisis is exactly where we are invited to remember what it is we are living for in the first place. Right? The purpose of life is to not get everything perfect. We really end up really damaging and suppressing the tenderness and the care of this human life when we're overly fixated on control. There's a temple here that requires our tending, sweep the floors, reconnect with something more meaningful than the mere mundanity of the day-to-day, even while performing the daily tasks. But we don't give value for the sweeping the floors and the day-to-day tasks on their own. We're serving something greater. And that Cancer 6 Capricorn 12th polarity just beautifully holds this duality of, as a human, there are many things to do. There's nothing unspiritual about that recognition. There's always things to do. This human life and this journey that we're on, this evolutionary path, says there are many, many, many things to do in the course of this lifetime. And we plan for them. We make a list, we schedule it, we arrange our life, and we tend to all the little things that need to happen every single day consistently. But this Pluto and Capricorn says, don't lose your soul to the world. Don't lose your soul and the larger picture of what's actually going on here. Remember, this is about remembering love, remembering God, remembering the holiness in your own life. And that requires a commitment to stay in touch with that. Mars in Cancer in the 7th, Pluto in Capricorn in the 1st. So now we've gone through half the zodiac and we're flipping the polarities. This Mars signature can trigger the extremes of codependency and overdependence on security through others. Reactions can be based here on a compulsive need to make sure everything's okay, be it catering to another person's needs as we see it, or needing to make sure everyone is always okay with us. Right? Are you okay? Is this okay? Are we all good? It's the compulsivity of Mars and Cancer in the 7th house. My security is dependent upon you. And so there can be a lot of emotional reactivity or long arguments or processing relative to the enmeshment of I need to be secure relative to the status and the nature of our relationship. This transit pushes up against the resistance patterns of Pluto to claiming our own sense of purpose, independence of what others think of us, right? This is Pluto and Capricorn in the 1st. The agency and the leadership of being yourself and walking your path, your authority, your own leadership. When the state of our relationship becomes a source of such intense emotional concern, healthy boundaries may be lost. We may find ourselves not saying no when we need to be doing other things with our life. Pluto and Capricorn in the 1st is a push, a concentration on the boundaries and the leadership to walk our soul path. And we need to be able to engage each life experience with that agency of yes, no, right? And it's not so much about controlling other people. It's about controlling and determining the state of our own mind. I'm not going to give in to this. I'm not going to give in to that. How am I going to protect the clarity and the freedom that I need to walk the soul path in freedom? Practicing this can bring up a lot of anger, wherein it becomes easy to project that the other person is the reason for why we are stuck, held back, and can't do what we need to do. These are, of course, all projections. So the evolutionary intention is to commit to soul purpose no matter what. The polarizations and compromises that occur in relationship are then understood as triggering where we are learning to express the clarity of our own soul leadership and self-authority while within our relationships. This is about cultivating the ability to express our needs and our no's and our yeses and to listen without reactivity, to hear all needs and to consider what is balanced and healthy from a soul level of insight. In doing this, relationships become a point of immense growth, not because anyone is trying to hold onto a state of security, but because you are willing to put evolution before the ephemeral illusion of security. Mars in Cancer in the 8th, Pluto in Capricorn in the 2nd. Our sexual, emotional, and psychological content comes up very deeply in this transit. We might find ourselves drawn to become instinctively involved with that which seems to impel our soul from a very deep place of desire, or conversely, others may become very deeply drawn to us in an intense way. All of this can happen in an almost hypnotic kind of way. The impelling force of desire itself, strong craving, as well as visceral emotion and aversion, all the dynamics of desire, I really want this or I'm really averted to that, can arise here. And in all cases, it can be very easy to get stuck in all kinds of emotional entrapment and attachments. Because Cancer is seeking security, 8th house is seeking to osmose something on the outside that we perceive we don't have, but want to osmose in order to realize it within. So deep attachment and bonding and unhealthy addictive patterns can be arising with this Mars in Cancer transit in the 8th house. So 2, the issue then becomes losing a connection with our essential ground of being. Being entirely outsourced in our external fixations on that which is external to oneself. So emotionally, this can elicit such a degree of volatility that it can degrade and negatively affect one's ability to feel secure within oneself, basic self-value, and the capacity to feel our own soul from within. This is Pluto and Capricorn in the 2nd house, grounded in the essential inherent self-value of our soul. In this case, addiction and obsession and emotional compulsion becomes a way of abandoning the garden, tending the garden of our own soul. The evolutionary intention is to engage in the comings and the goings of life, the desires as they arise along the soul path while staying committed to the continuity and the stability of your own soul inner being. When we find ourselves overly excited by all of the 8th house emotions of desire, jealousy, fear, attachment, addiction, resentment, the invitation is to recognize that these are all facets of an inner purification process. They're chipping away and pointing back to where we are learning to abide in our essential vibration, our essential wholeness. Inner stability and quiet, even in the midst of change or strong emotion. Just consider Capricorn in the second holds this quality of the farmer that every day is tending to the field, the garden, that which they're growing. And Pluto is that permeating commitment to stay in that inner tending process. It's a ground of cultivation. And being grounded in that, even in the midst of all the comings and the goings, or the strong emotions, or the strong attachments, the strong cravings and aversions that comes up with Mars and Cancer in the 8th, allows all of this to arise, but not to be so at whim, to act upon these energies. Like, I need to say this, do this, connect, get really deeply sexually, emotionally involved, or resist or run away. There can be such strong emotional content here, and the growth is in recognizing I am stronger and more stable than I understand myself to be. And all of this can arise and go. And let's just make a statement about this, Mars and Pluto in general. That's like the delicate threshold of evolution. When to act, when not to act. Because Mars, that energy needs to move somewhere. So the Mars-Pluto is like, at what level are we going to transmute this energy? At what level of consciousness? That it needs to be worked somehow. And that's where that Pluto opposition is really pointing to, where we're grounding in a deeper wisdom and strength to cultivate and to transmute all of the strong energy arising right now. But this can happen on various levels of consciousness, and our choices are going to move the energy, but often will just kind of lead us to, that led me here. Where do I really want to go? And I think oftentimes it's a matter of how quick our learning is going to go. And there's no judgment in that. We're going to make our choices. We're going to go where we go and do what we do and get involved in what we get involved in. Ultimately, it's all going to point us back within to then the next choice, and maybe perhaps a deeper level of self-awareness in that next choice. Okay. Mars in Cancer in the 9th, Pluto, Capricorn 3rd. The trigger here can be one of restlessness and a persistent seeking outside of oneself, an inner sense of being lost or never quite where one is supposed to be, and of needing something more to satisfy the emotional sense of feeling perpetually out of place. This can result in taking in way too much, reactively moving from one opportunity to another, leaving one experience to pursue something else that promises, this is going to make me feel better, this is going to give me that security or that realization or that sense of arrival that I'm so seeking. In all this movement and opportunism, you may feel deeply alienated from any sense of home or arrival. It's like seeking but never quite arriving. You may not feel honest and authentic with the life you are living, like a perpetual traveler unsure of where they are going and when they may find rest. And this is a core quality. Imagine Cancer in the 9th house. You're on this journey of life, but there's that deeper, more vulnerable question. Where's my arrival? Where's home? What am I seeking? When can I land on an inner level? The teaching of Mars and Cancer in the 9th is the beauty of emotional authenticity, being able to navigate this life journey from an authentic place, to learn that I'm at home in the moment, in the journey. But there can be a very visceral sense of feeling lost, maybe deeply out of place with where one is in life right now. Thus, with all of this movement and seeking, the mind will feel very scattered and ungrounded. The resistance patterns here relative to Capricorn, Pluto in the 3rd is a lack of intellectual agency to think critically for yourself and get to the bottom line of what's really going on. You can always feel like an outsider just passing through, and if so, you'll never really allow yourself to interact with your environment and share in meaningful exchange and learning. The restlessness here means I'm always seeking something that I'm lacking. I'm always trying to get somewhere else, which means I'm never going to be where I am and ask the thoughtful questions, really engage and chew on and work with the people, the thoughts, the ideas, the experiences, even the meditation practices that are right here. There's a sort of commitment to strengthening the clarity and the focusing of the mind with Pluto and Capricorn the third, which means overcoming the resistance patterns and the temptation to be restless and perpetually seeking. This can create immense intellectual confusion, flightiness, and lack of clear perspective. So the evolutionary intention is to stabilize the mental energy and develop a depth of emotional honesty that enables you to learn and teach what is of greatest essence exactly right where you are. Cut through the duality of never-ending thinking that will actually only create more problems and contradictory thoughts that lead nowhere. This requires a commitment to arrive on the journey where you are and ask the deeper questions, the questions that bring you home to your soul, that elicit more sincerity and an authentic felt sense of being exactly where we are all meant to be on this journey. The temptation again is it might not feel that way. It might feel like I gotta go somewhere else or do something else, or I can't be honest or authentic or completely present in my current experiences, or I don't feel understood. Dealing with issues of feeling misunderstood can perpetuate more alienation and restlessness with this signature. The commitment to arrive is one of the deepest edges for this signature. So we can give an example, let's say, of someone who is studying ninth house being higher education, or in the sense of, you're immersing yourself in a spiritual practice or a spiritual learning. All kinds of ideas or thoughts or concepts or dogmas can elicit a sense of, oh, that's not me. I don't belong here. That's very alienating, or I don't believe in that. And thus, instead of engaging it, we're going to, in a sense, demonstrate that we don't have any power within ourselves because we're looking for something that's going to make us feel just right. Looking for the right teacher or the right teaching that'll just be exactly everything that we need. And we're never going to find it. We're never going to feel that we're on our spiritual path as a result of that. So Pluto and Capricorn in the third says, on one level, don't give your authority away. Don't give your own mental agency and your power away. You might disagree. You might ask critical questions. You might get to finding some of the weak points or the shadow elements in some of these spiritual teachings. But that shouldn't become a reason to not commit yourself to your path and your own cultivation. And even as a teacher, this can be a great way to deepen and strengthen your own inner knowing by way of really being willing to think deeply and engage and chew on the teachings to make it real for yourself and not settle for anything that just makes you feel a certain way. Okay, Mars in Cancer in the 10th, Pluto in Capricorn in the 4th. So now we're flipping the polarities. This transit can reflect the high stress of being an adult with human needs in a fast-moving world that's very demanding. There are things to do, responsibilities to manage, and moment to moment, a range of emotions to regulate and process while all of it happens. The trigger here can be one of emotional repression, being so busy and preoccupied with one's duties that the inner emotional environment is run over by an overly active push to get things done and stay on top of one's life. There's so much to do. There's so many people and beings and needs that are requiring my attention, my time, my responsibility, that life can feel very harsh and pressuring. Maybe that we have no time for rest or for care, to really tend to ourselves. This can really highlight what it's like to be an adult, but to not know how to tend to the part of ourselves that needs to be held and cared for as well. So this triggers a resistance pattern to Pluto. This can create a state wherein we push way down the tender inner child that needs to be held, cared for, that needs rest and replenishment. What is repressed becomes distorted, and the unexpressed emotions must and will find a way out. This can express as external events pushing at your buttons or internal stress relative to denying our own feelings. On the flip side, there is the risk of becoming so overwhelmed that you cease acting with thoughtfulness and agency, allowing unhealthy emotional reactions to take the best of you. The evolutionary intention here is to establish and affirm a structural reality that nurtures and prioritizes what is truly important. This might mean giving more attention to how you feel and how your life is actually going, as opposed to just concerning with how it looks or appears on the outside. This opposition wants to strengthen your capacity to live according to your own inner soul authority, to establish a life that reflects who you are on the inside. So Pluto and Capricorn in the fourth, in a sense, is stripping away the meaningless artificial form of, I got a family with 2 cars and 2.5 kids and 2 whatever, and my, it's like these are all those things on the outside that have no meaning. And we can lose our life, lose our soul, and just the responsibilities that are required in upkeeping this perfect, keeping up with the Joneses kind of life. We want to be able to access the content inside the form, right? The delicate, rich inner soul terrain that is at the heart, at the core of the life that we're living. Otherwise, we're just going to feel very repressed and stressed, and probably either create events that push us or just lose our own ground. Mars in Cancer in the 11th, Pluto in Capricorn in the 5th. The trigger can be like an alien coming to try to fit into this earth and feeling like they're faced with a way of living that just doesn't make any sense. Like, how do I be a human and fit into what everyone else is doing? How do I nurture and care for my life? This can easily feel like you're an outsider. In your family, in your community, in your life, there's a deep sense of wanting friendship, connection, a sense of trust and affinity, but this might trigger a sense of, I don't belong, or I don't belong to this group, I'm not a part of this, or I'm too different, right? The guidance doesn't necessarily come from convention here, right? It's not about trying to fit into what other people do, or to try to live according to the precedent of the known. There's a drive here to free up and connect with your essential vibration, even if it doesn't fit into too many boxes. On the one hand, this can show up as feeling very disjointed or out of place with the people and the communities in our life, but on the other hand, this can also reflect a very intense inner stress relative to the suppression of our own individuality. What do we sacrifice in order to belong because we're so afraid of being different? And it's really interesting to note, 11th house is community, and on a primal level, Cancer, we all have this memory of living in community, where our own survival in ancient days, at what I would say a more golden age, wasn't about me and mine. It was about, we have to think in terms of us, right? How we're all relating together and a part of a greater ecosystem together. As a humanity, we have pretty much lost that, with the exception of some of us in bubbles that are really trying to reestablish a humanity of trust and inclusion and friendship and togetherness and sharing, right? But this can really elicit this ancient primal sense of, I'm without my people. If I'm without my people, I'm not going to get what I need. Or I'm with my people, but I don't trust them, or they don't trust me, or I don't know if I really belong. This can really be a core primal insecurity. So this triggers a resistance pattern to Pluto and Capricorn in the 5th, because that signature is about actualizing one's purpose in life. And so we can be overly concerned with what it looks like or of being approved of, right? How am I seen? Am I important? Do I have status? Here we need to define our own reality from within and not look on the outside. The resistance is, I'm not claiming my own authority. I'm too concerned with what it looks like. Right? So relative to the Mars in Cancer, what's acceptable, right? What's approvable? But Capricorn in the 5th says, be your own adult. What is the brand of your own soul? Express it. Be courageous with it. Bring it out. Don't be afraid to be seen. And that says you have to be true to yourself and live your life. Only then can you actually belong. Otherwise, it's losing your agency to be a part of something, but you're not really going to be there. So the evolutionary intent is to courageously trust the inner authority and strength of your own soul. You'll always belong and find a sense of community when you are true to your own vibration. This opposition emphasizes the strong need to be true to yourself, even if it means standing out. Learn how to be at home within your own soul, even as a group of one, if need be. Mars in Cancer in the 12th, Pluto in Capricorn in the 6th. The trigger here can express as an existential sense of feeling lost in the ocean of emotion. Who am I? Where is home? Where do I belong? This can trigger a deep devotional exploration of one's connection to the timeless, just as much as a deep sense of feeling far from home in an unexplainable kind of way. Mars in Cancer in the 12th can really bring up that orphan archetype, a deep internal sense of, where is the love? Where am I going to feel held? Where am I going to feel a deeper sense of security? And we might feel completely abandoned or betrayed by life. We might be in this very hyper state of insecurity and fear relative to not actually knowing our essential safety. This brings up the resistance patterns of Pluto, The resistance patterns of Pluto and Capricorn in the 6th are of avoiding and putting off the work that one is here to do. So the issue here is one can be endlessly procrastinating and stay in a state of emotional chaos and lostness and crisis on the basis of not feeling ready, feeling too much emotion, having too much going on that you don't feel you can really do anything meaningful with your life, right? How does someone that feels alone and lost and betrayed by God, by life, have the energy and the motivation to put their boots on and start, you know? This can be an issue of neglect or being overwhelmed by the impeding crisis of not taking control over our life. Because if we're not dealing with our life, it's actually going to result in more crisis and more chaos. 12th house corresponds to chaos and anarchy. So everything falling apart relative to not tending to our sole purpose, Capricorn 6th house, the work that we are here to do. The evolutionary intention is to devote your life to greater meaning and purpose. What actions, choices, and work and simple steps are calling right now? This is where we are to practice being at home, being an agent of love and higher meaning in this world. It is your willingness and availability to do the next thing, to cultivate your next steps, and then to surrender all concern with outcome that teaches us all that we actually are. The ability to demonstrate, I am at home, I am not lost, I am loved, and I am love, is grounded, made real, and demonstrated tangibly in our life by our actions. The ability to commit and act and engage practically in day-to-day actions and commitment to our own soul apprenticeship, the work and the service that we're here to perform, that says, I'm not lost because I'm actually allowing the love that I am to have expression in the form of my human experience. Okay, so in conclusion, to me, what's most meaningful about this transit is that it is innately pushing up against where we have yet to grow, where we are yet to realize and embody our essential strength and resiliency. This is active now as we're leading up to this transit. At the time of this video, Mars and Pluto are just 2 degrees away from each other. They're only going to get tighter. It's an incredibly strong energetic. For sure, we are all experiencing this in whatever way this is alive for all of us. As an eternal soul, we know not the power that we possess. It is a great opportunity to embrace times like these with an attitude and willingness of availability, willingness to learn more about who we are, and availability to think and act in new and better ways. May we all grow in joyfully unexpected ways, and remember that, as always, we truly never do this alone. As always, thank you so much for watching.